May I ask you to please state your name into the microphone?
Davin Vicente. I've been kind of silent in this entire, the earlier part of this, the TMT opposition, because as a student in STEM, it was always it's been an uncomfortable situation where you're in STEM, you're trying to do good, you kind of feel like if you do not, like if you oppose something like TMT, you get felt uncomfortable. So I was kind of silent in the earlier parts until about the groundbreaking. I was working as a technician for the USDA, and I was also working as a lecturer at the time. And at both jobs, I've kind of heard some side talk from people around me about the opposition. Along with, I would turn on the TV and I'll hear other people's comments about the opposition, and I began to feel like maybe it's time I should actually not care about, I guess, my own personal success and just actually speak up. So I was a little delayed on speaking up on that part. Since speaking up, I've been really pretty much personally attacked, whether it's just day-to-day or even at Office of Mauna Kea management events, including the open house. So I've had various different attacks based off that, whether questioning how much Hawaiian I am or my intelligence and if I really do support science. So I've experienced that. As a lecturer, students I interact with, I've had students come to me and actually have mentioned that they've had a hard time going through this. So not only personally am I going through a hard time watching this whole TMT, it's kind of, I've noticed students also have come to me and actually express their difficulties both as academics and emotionally. My position really is, I hear a lot of talk from both sides about balance about between astronomy and, so they generalize astronomy as science, and science isn't balanced with culture, and there's all the talk about this. So I just noticed that there isn't real balance between astronomy and everything else happening on the mountain, including other sciences, where you have sciences like conservation that's only really done in order to push projects like TMT through. So that's part of why I'm opposed to that. Basically, I feel like it's kind of an insult to have to, the only way forward is really always the only option forward is really to build the project, and I feel like although there's recognized damages that's going to be done by the project, that the only offset is going to be money offered to STEM education, which I feel is actually counterproductive to people like me. I've been in programs that have tried to bridge culture and science from my undergrad. I've done that as both volunteering and as a job for a little while after undergrad. And I feel like I've been involved with this bridging of science and culture for some time, and I feel like offering money as a way forward is actually counterproductive to people like me who've actually tried to bridge science and culture. And I feel like it's actually forcing people to choose to value money over their culture, whether if it's money for education or whatnot. I feel like it's unethical. So that's another reason why I'm actually been really vocal. I feel like this project isn't really doing anything to improve the current situation with already 13 telescopes up on the mountain. I feel like it's actually just going to add to the cumulative destruction of Mauna Kea that me and other Kanaka Maoli are going to be forced to inherit.
You and I talked briefly at lunch, and you told me that you had been to a Office of Mauna Kea meeting for the Mauna Kea Management Board.
Yes.
Can you tell me what your experience was there?
I've actually been through several. My first meeting I went and I decided to remain silent and just listen, which is what I tend to do. I like to take in my surroundings and what's happening before I actually open my mouth. So I went and I actually sat there and just listened, and then I left. I happened to be wearing an Aloha Aina shirt, and it was not long after the groundbreaking, and I was approached by an astronomer, and uh, actually quite aggressively, and he actually questioned how much Hawaiian that I actually was. Other events I've attended, I've had other people closely related to OMKM, like Mauna Kea Support Services, come up to me after and tell me that they disagree with things I say and wouldn't let it go. Been to an open house after the June 26th stop of construction. I went to that open house, and I voiced my concerns about how I feel would be a better way forward, and a former board member actually decided to insult me instead and tell me that I'm probably going to be on federal financial support for the rest of my life, along with my kids. So I've been my experiences at OMKM hasn't been the most pleasant experiences of my time. I've never been okay with looking up to the mountain and seeing the telescopes, but I've never knew how to feel because I was really interested in STEM, and it's always been quite clear with a lot of other people who teach STEM that if you don't support things like this, you're kind of anti-science, which kind of makes it difficult for you to have your own self-identity while going through academia.
What if your students, you said that you teach a lot of classes, and some of your students also do not support the 30-meter telescope. Can you tell us what their experience has been as they related it to you?
Well, I know during the early part of the real vocal opposition, a lot of the students were going up to the Mauna and actually taking a lot of time out of their studies to do so. And because it impacted them, including myself, it's hard to really focus when you never know when construction is going to happen and what you feel kind of helpless. So how I felt is kind of how they felt, except I had no choice. My responsibility is to teach them, so I just show up. But
did they all continue to come to class, or did they miss class?
My students all came to class. They've had a hard time. I've had students doing unrelated assignments actually asked to kind of step out because they're having a hard time because they're thinking about Mauna Kea. I have had students that I know of, but they're not my actual students. I know they were having difficulties, and I recommended some advice to go talk to their professors and try to figure out how not to impact their academics.
Given that this is a science reserve, not an astronomy reserve, what kinds of science would you think would also be appropriate in the science reserve of Mauna Kea?
Well, I feel like astronomy wouldn't be the only science. Conservation should be something. I was always told by my instructors in undergrad to appreciate Hawaii because Hawaii is very unique. We have so much different environments in one location that we should appreciate it and take care of it. So I feel like conservation is a big one because we have one Mauna Kea. If once we do damage to it, we're never going to go back and undo it.
You state that part of your opposition to the TMT project is based on the irreparable damage the proposed TMT project would have on a unique environment and, to quote, my culture. What type of irreparable damage are you referring to?
Well, anytime you touch an environment and you do construction on it, you'll never be able to put it back to its natural state. And part of my culture is the land.
Okay. So what's the problem with receiving money compensation for irreparable damage?
Basically, the way I'm reading, the way I see it is, they're doing something wrong, and we're just going to throw some money at it to offset it. But I feel like by that you're saying it's okay for the culture to take a negative impact as long as we throw a little bit of money towards the future. But there's a lot of other projects in the past that they might have not done that, and even if they did throw money, I've inherited that. So other telescopes that have come before, I had no say in that, and kind of relates to that.
I read through your direct testimony, and I do agree that nobody should be bullied. Nobody should have to be made to feel discriminated against or uncomfortable, for any reason, one way or another. Along those lines, are you familiar or aware of the pro TMT students,
Yes.
specifically the astronomy students who have endured some bullying or some backlash because of their pro TMT views?
Yes, I'm aware of both sides.
Yeah. Our client is a group of Native Hawaiians who support the building of the telescope, but only if done in a culturally sensitive way. When you testified regarding the balance between science and culture, it made me think, and I want to ask this question. Do you believe that there is room for both astronomy and culture on Mauna Kea?
Well, astronomy is already up there, so it's just, is there going to be allowed room for culture, I feel?
I'm sorry?
I'm not sure if there's room left for culture. That's how I feel.
Okay. Do you have any cultural practices on the Mauna?
Not regularly, but I've been up there. I don't personally see myself as, I don't know how to word it. Can you define cultural practices?
Well, do you regularly practice any cultural practices, whatever they may be, on Mauna Kea?
Not necessarily on Mauna Kea.
Okay. You've testified about the backlash that you've experienced. Yes.
Yes.
You've also acknowledged that you're familiar with the backlash that the pro TMT students have experienced.
Yes.
Do you believe that pursuing a compromise between astronomy and culture on Mauna Kea will allow us to go forward in ensuring that type of bullying doesn't happen in the future?
I think it would depend on what the compromise is and if it truly is a real compromise.
Are those discussions worthwhile pursuing?
If it's like an honest and true compromise and we're going to actually have a discussion, then yes. But then if it's more of a, say we have a compromise just to move forward, then I don't think it's a true compromise.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Mrs. Vicente, it was nice meeting you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vicente.
Good afternoon.
Are you familiar with the Northwest Ordinance?
Of course.
Never mind. We'll skip that question.
Wait,
Actually, I don't have
Did
any-
I get an answer?
I hear it every day.
Thank you. I have no questions for this witness, Your Honor.
By building the TMT, will it cause a substantial adverse impact to the natural and the cultural resource within the surrounding?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Yoshida had asked about compromising the culture and the astronomy. Do you think the compromising should have been taking place before any contested hearing at this point?
I think the compromise should have come within the actual planning of the project.
Thank you. No more questions.
It hurts me to know that people would ridicule young, learning, educated minds about interests of economics. Would you say that money is a big part of this proposed TMT CDUA?
It certainly feels that way.
Thank you. So do you think that the money that is provided to these STEM programs is part of the motive of the TMT being built?
Not so much a motive, but more of a justification.
Okay.
In your experience, are there any STEM programs that have successfully bridged the gap between science and culture?
By successful, can you define that?
Well, something that has successfully bridged differences or problems that exist between people who advocate scientific standpoints versus, for instance, cultural aspects of an issue.
Well, personally, I feel like the STEM program that I was involved with at UH Chilo that was funded through the NSF was a pretty good job at beginning the bridge. So it depends what you mean by successful, but it was a Kehola STEM program, and that was out for a while. But I feel like that did a pretty good job because personally for me, I felt like it actually made that connection.
Did you say there were 2 instances where STEM programs have assisted in bridging the gap between science and culture? Is that right?
I would say my personal experience, the program that I was working with, I feel like it helped me bridge it because the way I see it is STEM and my culture. I feel like my culture is science. Like I see it as one now, and I feel like I'm not the only one who kind of sees it that way. So I don't see it as so much of bridging is more of a realization that your culture can be viewed as a science in the way you view the world.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything that could be done to make building the TMT project acceptable to you personally?
Not as currently proposed.
Are there certain mitigation measures that could be employed to make the project acceptable to you?
Can I elaborate on my answer?
Yeah, I'm asking if you are aware of any mitigation measures that would make building the TMT project acceptable to you.
Utilizing existing footprints, minimizing the impacts on the environment by only using existing footprints. There's like 13 footprints up there. That would be the only way I'd probably be okay with it. Further developing new sites would definitely keep me opposing it.
All right, so the fact that it's being proposed in the Northern Plateau is a condition that you find non-negotiable, is that right?
Any new site I feel is non-negotiable. I feel like there's already enough damage.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Davin. Thank
Hi.
you. Thanks for being here, taking time out from your studies. I wanted to ask you just a couple of things. You mentioned in your written direct the other sciences, other important sciences that could be done on Mauna Kea. Can you give some examples of those?
Conservation, natural resource management, a lot of the things that go into the EIS, but I feel it's usually only done for the EIS.
Would it include other things like geology, hydrology?
I was actually going to say hydrology too, but I wanted to summarize. Geology, hydrology, a lot of the other sciences.
And then would you also include in those sciences the cultural practices as well?
Cultural practice to me is a science, so. Okay.
And would you agree that cultural practice is a science because it's measurable and repeatable?
I feel it's not a science in the Western sense, but I feel it's definitely a science because it's definitely been repeatable, it's measurable. Observations that our ancestors have done for centuries has been passed on, and I feel like that makes it a science, and the culture itself is related to the environment. So everything that we have, everything's related to the natural landscape and our relationship to it.
The natural landscape and land use also.
Land use, and so that kind of falls into our relationship with the natural environment to me.
And, gosh, I had one. But I think that's good.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Vicente, thank you very much. You're released.
Thank you.